time to actively engage summer. Hopefully begin the process of exploring this a little bit. So, when you arrived at Ravenswood today, by whatever means you did, consider what brought you here right now. If you came by car, which I'm assuming you did, when you stepped out of it, which foot did you use? Do you remember? How did it feel when it touched the ground? How did your legs feel, your breathing, your general mood? Was it different from when you got here to when you got to this point? Your heart rate. What gait did you use when you walked? Because this type of inventory that I'm bringing up, it's nothing new. I'm bringing it up to establish a certain type of context for my methodology. Because let's say you've been working on a project. Let's say you decided to do a diagram of that. What led you to start the project? How did you arrive at it? Physically, how did you arrive at it? Let's say you were working on a poem and you got up in the morning. Did it come to you on the way to the bathroom? Or was it something from a dream or sleep? And so not just mentally, what I'm suggesting is not just what mentally brought you to it, what physically brought you to it. Because there's always motion involved, and the body's always involved. And so the things that you smelled on the way, the things that you heard on the way to coming up with that idea, what you're experiencing now as a result of it, what are you looking for now in terms of trying to complete that project. And so what I'm driving at is that this inventory can obviously get massive, right? If you really, well, as I was thinking about it and brought it with one person, they were like, if I spent a lot of time doing this, I could spend all my time doing it up to the point where I wouldn't be able to get anything else done. And so it'd be easy to lose track of the original subject. And I'm really glad they brought it up because then I said, aha. The thing is when you look at projects, when a lot of us typically look at projects or things that we're engaged with, the ground, the ore topic, we tend to, I think, in the West, we compartmentalize things. We have the theme, the subject, the topic, or whatever, and then we have the background and extraneous factors. And so what I'm driving at, in a sense, that the more you focus on the background issues, the more you look at the links and connections between them, that possibly the minutia and the background issue matters that are related to it, once you compile one of these lists, one of these crazy, gigantic lists, eventually, I think what one starts to see happening is that ground and background start to interchange. The things that might have appeared extraneous to begin with actually then come to the fore as maybe being something that was far more important or had a greater role in the actual production of that idea or creative act. So what I'm driving towards is this idea of an extra-dimensional mandala, a figuration of the field of perception which itself is the very field of composition. Acknowledgement is composition on one level, a very important one, realization. Writing's just a byproduct. And so we find that everything's related to everything through these sort of operations. And one of the things that I've done, which has been fairly useful, and this comes with mandala drawing in maybe the more traditional senses. So I've worked on a project and I've intentionally gone on a hike to get inspiration for it. So I'll just sit down and I'll start drawing a diagram. Okay, I got up in the morning, I walked across the hall, I got into the car, then I drove to the school, I got to the high school trail behind it, and then I walked the loop. And then this is a sort of a loose, sort of playful method of drawing a mandala or diagram. And then I'll actually record it and use that as a sort of a starting point, so, or connected with it. And you can use it for meditation, you can use it for a lot of things, but not just the drawing itself. Then, so you've got a figuration, then you've got figures of speech that you associated with it, and figures within the field of perception. So you combine them all, and then so the mandala at that point, it's no longer just a visual thing, but it's moved into the realm of extra dimensionality. So as I was sharing it with one person I know who's into dance, they said this is fantastic, because now they've got sort of like a floor plan for dance. They can use it, or just ignore it altogether. But to use it as a synesthetic thing. So you've got sound. She wasn't drawing it like me. Like I would draw a diagram and a piece of paper and say, oh yeah, at this point in the walk I came up with this idea, or I came up with this idea, or I felt a cramp in my leg that had developed a week ago or something. And for her, she says, no, there are sounds that go with it. I heard the leaves crunching here. I heard the combination of the spring peepers there. So it's building accretions. It's building them in such a way that it brings in everything into the field on an interchangeable basis. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the idea of juxtapositional magic. Joel Barocco came up with this idea. It's really brilliant stuff. He talks about that the field radiates, that between objects and thoughts, there's an aesthetics. Painters do it. There's no second guessing. And a lot of them work on the object. Okay, so you've got the subjective is the ground versus background allows for the relationships to grow, roles to switch, rotate, and expand. And instead of setting up a temple or meditation spot, it's the idea of just things out of the corner of your eye catch your attention. Just like, maybe the torn design in the sleeve catches my eye. I really like that a lot. So I keep that in the mental image of my mind. The rock over here I like. Okay, so those two things I begin to just freely associate maybe with cooking. So there's the beginning of a mandala for cooking. Okay. And that one can keep building up this temple from these images. One I've constructed is from a stack of books. It's been really interesting because in meditation then I'll move that stack of books and sort of see what's in between the pages of the books. Then all of a sudden I get sigils, I get all sorts of things out of that. And that's something that can be used anytime throughout the day. It doesn't matter when or how. Is anybody familiar with Austin Spare's method of sigils? Anybody? Okay. Spare basically, and this helps to inform a lot of what I've brought up here. Spare basically stated that, okay, symbols the conscious mind relates to. You use symbols to form words. You write DOG to represent dog, and the conscious mind can relate to it. Sigils, on the other hand, are designs that the subconscious mind relates to. So he had a little formula of the one that is most often cited, I desire the strength of a tiger. So to work on acquiring, building up his strength, you write out that phrase, I desire the strength of the tiger, removed all the vowels, so you just have the consonants, remove the repeating consonants, and then rearrange the letters randomly to form an image that has nothing to do with the actual enunciated, interpretable phrase. And what's left is what he called the sigil. And then you use that to focus on in times of stress, or you meditate on it, you send it back into your mind. If you're feeling stressed out, feel it absorb that stress. And then to activate it, forget about it. Just let it drift.
How do you spell that? Sigil?
S-I-G-I-L.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, as you might be able to see, there's a connection between that method and what I've brought up here, especially like just drawing this random mandala. for me, I find this is fairly useful because when you're doing the sigils, as he mentions it, it's sort of a random thing. When you're doing one based on this sort of practice here, it is founded and given energy and credence by physical movement, physical propulsion, things that we have to do. So the somewhat quotidian activities of walking or breathing are things that inform this already. And I think with walking especially, I was going to remember one of the things I said when you started off walking, how did you walk initially? How did your gait change? And a friend of mine who introduced me to a number of folks that are in Cherokee tribe in North Carolina, the gait of power, the way they walk through the woods, a way to walk long distances. And it doesn't take anything special. It's focusing on just the way your legs are spaced when you're walking and how they feel. And I had a fairly good experience with that once when I was in Ireland, and I tore something really bad in my quads. Just by focusing on how I walked, it was amazing how the pain disappeared and I was able to cover quite long distances. So your gait is actually your gait of power. It's really a door to probably one of the most important things in terms of because that's what we naturally do, we walk. And you can run, you can jump, you can climb, but the human body is really designed for walking first and foremost. So I've given you a basic, is there any questions so far? We've got a small group. Rather than me just ramble on, I'd like to address things as we go. Any questions? Any concerns?
You're talking about forgetting this that you kind of set up as like as the mandala, or as like, but it's not necessarily used for specific memories.
No.
Dissociation.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. It's like it's giving an actual, tangible, visible exteriorization of a mental map.
Exteriorization, right, yeah.
In a play, but the important thing to keep in mind is it's in a play-like manner. Do you get that? It's not really a systematic.
Right, it's not.
If you're sitting there and it's like, yes, I got up in the house, and somebody's like really crazy anal, has a map drawing of their house, I'm not suggesting that.
Sort of like, I got to hit on a distillation, a miniature of like Olson's on making a mappa mundi.
Yes. Oh, sure.
It is of my being.
Yeah, of your being, and what I'm but this is the map of your being in daily, otherwise ignored motion, of the most basic aspects of what you're doing.
To find something else in those everyday motions.
Yeah.
Allow you to find something else in there.
Yeah. And to use it to link with the random thoughts that sort of run around.
Never necessarily be connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. As I said, my biggest concern is ground and background. I have an idea, I want to expand on it. What are the things that surround it? What are the things that sort of came into play with it? Are they really then actually part of the background, or are they part of the thing? Right. Yeah, the thing in itself.
Really doing,
yeah. Am I paying attention to the specifics at the expense of the generals?
Right. I see.
Yeah, or vice versa. It's easy enough to do the other. Now, to take it one more step, now this is something that depends on really what your proclivities are, because some people really don't find this useful, but I think if you have more of an analytic approach to things, and if you tend to, want to run with this more, what I found useful with it, from my book, Sacred Alignments, I have a section where I talk about the movement of meditation. Traditional yantra meditation in the East is from outer to inner. So you might have the Kali, you might have the Kali yantra, which is you've got a triangle and then you've got these squares around it. You've got several squares. So, for example, and then so when the typical method of meditation, as I said, is from the outer to the inner sections. of the yantra, imitating the metaphysical notion of consciousness as it rises in awareness from external influences, like we were talking about here just a minute ago, to deepened inner awareness. So surrounding the square boundary of a yantra are re-entrance gates, or temenos. They look like, little anomalies in it, whether they're additional squares or whatnot. And so a mantric vibration is then assigned to each of these levels, each of these points. You'll see Devanagari, you'll see the characters, the letters at each of those points. And then that lead further into the heart of the lotus. So the shapes comprising these yantras follow a sort of syntax. Now, this is what interests me the most here. Yantras have basically evolved from three characters. I say Riji, straight and symmetrical, Susumna, curved and symmetrical, or Visama, quasi-symmetrical or eccentric. The most basic shape is the point, the bindu, and the line, and next the triangle. The point's viewed as the primary enclosure of the Siva Sakti principle. So what I talked about in sacred alignments is that, so this is a very formal explication of how it's done in the East, but now let's come back to our yantra here. So what I think, rather than being able to assign a specific meaning, there's a grammatography at work here. There is a syntax to motion, I think, for all of us. There is an order that we do things in to get a specific result. You walk, you lift your leg, you put your foot down. Some people ride on the ball of their foot, other people land on their heel. So there is a syntax to this motion. And for those that are so inclined, once you've drawn your mandala and you've assigned certain things to it, then you might find it useful to assign syntactical labels to aspects of your movement throughout the day or your behavior. I mean, for instance, I know if I have to drive on the highway a lot, and they've done the scientific studies, your heart rate goes up, everything. People just naturally get into that mode. That's why it's conducive to road rage being, evoked from that condition. And then when I stop the car, get out and walk, I feel a heck of a lot better usually. And so there is obviously a syntax to that. There's not a visual syntax, but there is a psycho-neural syntax, obviously. A change in breathing, a change in attention. Because when you're in the car, you can't let the attention wander when you go out in the woods and you walk. You then can't allow it to wander. So I guess maybe, I didn't even think about it. You could say that, walking in the woods, your attention, you could say that that's Visama, quasi-symmetrical or eccentric. Moving out in concentric circles. That's what I do. You might look, you hear something there, you see something there, you hear the birds further out. The more you, and if you sit down and you're quiet, then it's always easier to become much more aware of all the other sounds and smells and things moving into the picture. Now, obviously, if you think about that for a while, what I'm suggesting now is that it sort of works its own way into becoming almost its own form of psychoanalysis. But why do things arrange themselves the way they do in people's lives? Why do people congregate with who they do? And if we were to spend time at it here, I had someone tell me once, maybe there's an astrological reason. Why do people congregate the way they do in a group? Why are we all standing where we are next to who we are right now? This is something that is obviously a two-way street. It's not just dictated by our own will, but it is the field that we have walked into. The magnetism of the field, the synchronicity of the field that is dictating this, that is affecting and generating this as well. Oh, and what's that term? Yeah, there's the Aboriginal term, yoro. Everything standing up, new and alive. Standing up, new and alive. But I always like that term because it encapsulates a lot, actually, their idea of the dream time, because the dream time is an ongoing thing. It's an eternal process. Because you'll hear a lot of people talk about the fact, okay, when someone dies, they return to the dream time, but it's there. It's always there. And I think this process, too, as I said, in sensory overload, is one of those, oh, and then dreams come into the picture. Yeah. So when you hook that into it too, then you get a further window into the dreams. So you see, the way my discussion has been geared and what we're sort of dealing with here, the original idea of dealing with poems and inspiration, and you can see where the point I've arrived at now is quite a distance from it. But as far as I'm concerned, that's winning the game because it's using poetry and writing and the creative process in an expansive manner, so that the field of composition is not just the poem you were working on, but the field of composition is your own personality and your own will and your own ideas and your mental motion and evolution through the field.
So it is because mantra is a vehicle. I mean,
Yes.
a vehicle.
Yes.
You basically create a vehicle, your own vehicle.
Yeah. Well, if you want to look at mantra, you want to connect it to poetry, so mantra, melopia, as Pound put it, the sound elements earwise of the poem. The yantra is phanopia, the image casting power, or the imagery aspect of it, and the final, or then what he called logopia, or the actual word generation point, the point of articulation. But I sort of refer to, I would then say that that's related to Tantra, and as Garrett and some people would say, there's really no such thing as Tantra, but I look at the ancient root derivations of the term Tantra, tanu meaning to stretch, meaning, tanu meaning stretch or weave. So the idea of using sound, smell, motion and everything as ways to work with molding, pulling, and playing with the weave, as it were.
Playing with the weave.
Yeah, because I want to say, so typically, I think it became clear to me as I considered this, a lot of methods of meditation, magic, and ritual are for a purpose. Typically you set off, like even with Spare's method I mentioned, okay, I have an objective, I want to attain this, so I'm going to do this. But to me, poetry or dance or song is a method of finding ways to open oneself up to the greater purpose at hand, at large, the matrix, the tapestry of interaction, and synchronicity. So, to me, it's a translation of the greater act, the making that makes itself. And the permission, really, what I've talked about here, this is really just the means of creating a space wherein one permits oneself to be enchanted by the interaction of all these elements. On a lesser scale, in one's own life, and it's not always necessarily the major decisions we make, it could be just these reflexive knee-jerk reactions of walking down a trail. Maybe there's a mess or there's ice on the trail and you just have to bypass it and go somewhere else. At that point, everything's been altered. That is, in short, my notion here, this somewhat expansive and readily unraveling system. I hope you found it interesting, potentially useful. I know it was covering a lot of ground, but I think it lends itself to so many applications that it was worth doing in this format. Well, thanks for coming. I hope it's of some use.